Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking with Dillon Lange about Godzilla. So when did you first become interested in Godzilla and other kaiju, Dillon? Or can you remember that far back?
Exactly. I would say it was probably around the same age as whenever I got into Jurassic Park, like two, around that age. The first Godzilla movie I saw was the '98 one with Matthew Broderick, which that is it's kind of a fun monster movie in its own right, but if you try to break down like the themes and the ideas and concepts that the Godzilla movies usually work with, it's not that true of a Godzilla film. But after that, my parents, after I watched that on repeat for like a year or two, my parents bought me this book, which I couldn't find. I wanted to find it so I could show it off, but I can't find it. That had it had summaries and behind the scenes photos of like all of the movies up to I think the 25th one, which is Godzilla versus Destroya, which was I think 1994, 95. It's a couple years before the American one. And that is really what kind of got me interested, is because I would see all these behind the scenes photos or just these pictures from these movies, and they'd be very interesting to me. And also on the Matthew Broderick DVD, there was a trailer for Godzilla vs. Mothra and Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, the ones from the 90s. And those both kind of captured my imagination, especially the Ghidorah one, because there's something really cool to me about a three-headed golden dragon. And the book also helped that because Ghidorah pops up probably like the second most of any of Godzilla's rivals, compared to like all the other monsters. He probably pops up like the second most, with Mothra being number one. And so it's like, oh, there's lots of Ghidorah. That's cool. And then that gets me down the rabbit hole of like, oh, what's this weird like bird with hooks and a chainsaw stomach? What is that? That's Gigan? Okay. But yeah, and so the first Japanese Godzilla movie I probably saw when I was like 4, I would say, and that was a Blockbuster rental of Godzilla 2000, which was so Japan gave the rights of Godzilla to Sony to make a Hollywood adaptation, and whenever it came out in Japan, the Japanese didn't like it at all, and so Toho very quickly kind of threw together a film to kind of be like a response to it in a way. This is how the Japanese do Godzilla. And the same thing happened many years later with Godzilla 2014, except Japan liked that one a fair amount because it was a bit truer to the character. But yeah, then they threw together Shin Godzilla, which was pretty awesome in my opinion. There's a ton of Godzilla out there. If anyone's interested, you can start almost anywhere because continuity is almost non-existent with Godzilla movies. Very rarely do you get characters that bleed into one another.
The 2014, 16 or whatever one where he stomps over San Francisco or something.
Yeah.
San Francisco gets a lot, gets stomped on a lot lately.
Yeah.
The Star Trek movies and one of the X-Men movies, right?
Pacific Rim and
takes a lot of damage.
Planet of the Apes, the new ones, take place in San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah, the guy who was a star of that, whose name escapes me, after a while I wanted to warn all the people that he met.
Yeah.
He keeps falling in with different groups of people, and then everybody dies except him, right? And then he finds another group of people, and then they all die except him. It's like, okay, people, just stay away. Stay away from this man.
There's kind of a trend in kaiju films in general where your main character is almost cursed. But yeah, I don't know. Godzilla's a difficult thing to talk about in like a broad sense because there's, again, a lot. There's 33 films right now, I think. Somewhere between 32 and 33. And
they fit within like this whole kaiju thing, right? 'Cause
yeah,
I grew up on Johnny Sokko's Robot and Ultraman, right? But they're
yeah.
still like, are they still making Ultraman? And
Oh, there's tons of Ultraman.
yeah, it's like I'm pretty sure that in when I was growing up, we had like probably one season of it, and they would just show the same 6 episodes over and over and over.
Yeah.
But there's like 30 or 40 years of episodes of Ultraman, right?
Yeah,
So it's certainly a cultural thing where that just goes and goes, and everyone wants to see, I guess, giant robots and giant monsters.
Yeah. Oh, there's a list of like, I'm looking at 20 almost different shows for Ultraman. Because I had this brief thing where I was like, okay, how many actually are there? There's a ton. There's in fact an anime on Netflix right now of Ultraman that kind of takes it into a little more of a serious kind of style. And if we're going to get into like tokusatsu, that whole genre of television with giant monsters and kind of superheroes, that also you have like 10 to 20 different shows for Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, which became Power Rangers in the States. You got all sorts of shows like that. I'm not even sure where, because I know that the States, Saban, the guy that did Power Rangers, whenever he adapted that into, or took the footage and edited it together with American kids, that whole thing, he tried to get that off the ground a couple times with different shows, because he was trying to strike gold on multiple shows, and none of it was sticking, because there was like VR Troopers and a couple other things, and they only got like 2 seasons, if that. And then to go back into like, interesting thing, I'm a big fan of Spider-Man. Spider-Man is kind of the inception of that whole genre of television in Japan, because there was this Spider-Man TV show made before Super Sentai, before Kamen Rider, before any of that, that Japan made. There's a Spider-Man show, and it was basically Power Rangers. It was him going up against what were essentially the putty from Power Rangers. He was going up against these just faceless enemies that he would then beat up, and then the main bad guy would throw a big monster at him, and then he would get in his giant robot, because apparently Spider-Man has a giant robot now, and fights him. And like, that's so weird and interesting to me that Spider-Man is kind of where that whole genre stemmed from. But I lost my train of thought for a second there.
So with the original Godzilla is at 50. You know what the year is? 54. So of course we get a sort of chopped up version of States that had Raymond Burr in it. But there is, and that's the one I've seen because it was on like Saturday afternoon sometime.
Yeah.
Some like ABC Saturday afternoon movie. But that kind of started it all for like these Toho movies, right?
Yes, it was definitely the thing that like inspired Japan specifically to do giant monster movies, and their specific style of putting people in suits and on these miniature sets. Because what inspired Ishiro Honda, who I actually share a birthday with, I found out, he made the original Godzilla movie after seeing a rerun in a theater of King Kong. Like King Kong had been put back into theaters for some reason. I think it was like an anniversary or something in Japan, and that captured his imagination. And Godzilla was in fact supposed to be done in stop motion, but because of how Japan, how they film their movies, he had a super strict like kind of schedule, and stop motion takes a lot of time to do, especially if you're trying to do it properly. So instead he just made a suit and threw someone in there, and the suit was like 200 pounds and couldn't breathe barely. And so the poor guy in there, I can't remember his name for the life of me right now, but he would get out of the suit and they would just pour out like a bucket of sweat from the suit, and there were certain instances where he would just pass out in the suit underneath the super hot stage lights and the fires. That's a whole discussion you can have there with just how all of the suit actors for these movies put their lives on the line practically. Same guy was in the Rodan suit in, I think it was Ghidra. He was filling in for someone for like that specific day or something, and during one of the shots he was in the suit and they were dangling him and throwing him, and the wire snapped and he just fell from like a height that he could have definitely broken his neck from or something. Yeah, all of the suit actors have some sort of like horror story to say.
That one is my favorite, Ghidra.
Yeah.
It has everything. I mean, it has Rodan, it has Mothra as a caterpillar, it has the little singing Japanese fairy girls, it's got a Martian princess, and she's got amnesia, and it's like, what isn't in there? Maybe Gamera is not in there, but
Yeah.
it's just like let's just throw everything in one movie, and it's a lot of fun. I do love that one.
Another one that's kind of throw everything. There's two that are very throw everything in one movie, and that is Destroy All Monsters, which has Ghidorah, it has Rodan, it has Mothra as a larva, it has Varan, it has Manda, it has like the giant spider from Son of Godzilla, I think. It has the Son of Godzilla, Manila. It has like almost all of the Showa era Godzilla films. They're monsters and other monsters that were just in other Toho films.
So they kind of did that with last year's King of Monsters, or whatever it was, Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Yeah.
So we had Godzilla and Rodan and Ghidra, and did we have Mothra?
Yeah.
Any of the others, or is it just those?
They didn't get the rights because Toho is very protective of their creations. They didn't get the rights for a lot of the other monsters, but they threw in light spoilers for the end of the movie. At the end of the movie, there's a scene with like all of these different monsters, and so they created a lot of monsters that are kind of references to the Toho ones, or could even or they're just entirely new in general. But there is like a giant spider that's very similar to the one from Son of Godzilla. There's a couple things in there. There's a big mammoth one. I forget the name of him, but he's become a fan favorite. He's like this giant mammoth without a trunk, but he's got the big tusks and he's huge, just like all the kaiju.
So in that movie, humans actually do stuff?
Yes. I think that there's like a trend in a lot of the Godzilla movies where the humans are kind of just, they have their own plot that then gets affected by the Godzilla plot. And sometimes that leads to you kind of sitting there and going, okay, get back to the Godzilla plot. I don't care about what's going on with this guy and his lover or whatever.
The Nepalese princess has amnesia and thinks she's from Mars. Yeah.
And then, so King of the Monsters is one of the few times, except for maybe Final Wars, where the humans are actively like guiding the plot, where they're the ones that woke up King Ghidorah from his slumber in the Antarctic, because there's like these terrorists that are trying to destroy the world, basically. They're trying to reset the balance of nature. But little do they know, King Ghidorah is actually from space. That was something that they kept that surprised me. I thought for sure that they wouldn't keep the fact that he was possibly a space alien in that movie, because the current movies are all about trying to make it more realistic, and that's kind of silly. But you're working with a 3-headed golden dragon. I think it doesn't matter anymore. So they kept the fact that he was an alien and he like crashed into the planet, and so he completely ruins the ecosystem. And so like they're going around trying to wake up other monsters or trying to guide other monsters into fighting King Ghidorah to try and like stop King Ghidorah, but he's just completely unlike any other iteration of King Ghidorah, but he's completely unlike anything that anyone's ever seen and any of the monsters. he can like regenerate, like he gets his head ripped off at one point and it regenerates, and he causes just this massive like hurricane lightning storm wherever he goes. It really feels like an alien creature that just completely destroys our environment. That movie is very interesting because of that, in my opinion. It also has a focus on scientists, which I kind of prefer for your kaiju films. Because with the scientists, it is believable that they are following the monster, or that they are, or that they'll be in a situation that requires them to be near the monster. Whereas to me, with like a military character, it was just like with the main guy from 2014. There's a certain point in that movie where you go, how convenient that the monster just happens to be in his path again. It almost seemed like every time he was somehow there, and you're kind of like, that's weirdly convenient, but okay. It's a movie, I can suspend my disbelief, but it's still weird.
But the scientists have a reason to keep being in the way, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Or you go the Final Wars route, which Final Wars was like the last Japanese Godzilla movie until 2016, and that was in 2004. And that one is another one where they went, let's throw everything in the kitchen sink. That one has aliens, it has mutants, it has a pro wrestler in that movie that like he was a boxer with a pretty impressive record. He was an American boxer that then went to pro wrestle in Japan, and he got super popular. And so he's one of the main characters in that movie, and he has this great line towards the alien leader, where he says, "There's two things you don't know about Earth: Godzilla and me." And that has sick martial arts kung fu action on motorcycles. And it has all of these different monsters. It has even more than Destroy All Monsters. There's a point where it's almost a slasher movie, but for kaiju. Because Godzilla is like asleep for half of the movie, and you get all of this kaiju action from all these different monsters. And then they wake up Godzilla to save the situation, basically. They were like, he's the only one that can fix this. And so the last half of the movie is Godzilla just taking out every single one of these kaiju in like 15-second scenes. And it's crazy. That one, they're mutants who have like these super martial arts skills that the aliens who are invading like can control for some reason, because they have like the alien DNA in them. And so like there is this human plot that kind of does get interwoven into the kaiju plot because of how closely related like the alien plot is to all of this. And then again, they kind of like with how they woke up King Ghidorah in the new one, they wake up Godzilla also in Antarctica, and he has this big fight with Gigan, a very short, but it's a pretty big fight. And then later on, towards the end of the movie, you have this final battle between Godzilla, a new version of King Ghidorah, and Gigan, and then Mothra is on the side of Godzilla. And it's this huge scope of a film that I'm impressed that they attempted to do, even with their like very limited budget. I think that one isn't necessarily like a good film, but it's a fun movie that people definitely should check out. But yeah, I prefer whenever the human plots are relatively important. That or it should be if the human plot is going to be more about how the kaiju affect the humans than it is how the humans affect the plot. It should be like Godzilla is the villain, like in the original or in the 2016 Shin Godzilla. That whole thing, I think it works a lot better if Godzilla is just kind of just this animal that just wanders through Japan, and then you've got your scientists just going like, well, what do we do? And so they aren't necessarily they aren't guiding the plot, but they're trying to save the plot. They're like, we're trying to save the day here. and that's whenever Godzilla gets a lot more allegorical, which there's a whole lot of discussion there. To me, I think the American ones make the nuclear allegory weird. I don't know how in depth I want to get with that, but essentially it changes the nuclear. The idea of Godzilla is that he's this nuclear threat, and that he represents like the death of Hiroshima in a way, and Nagasaki, and that was like a very like personal thing for Japan whenever they made the original. And then in 2016's Shin Godzilla, he's more of a allegory for the natural disaster that, like, there was an earthquake, tsunami, and a nuclear reactor like melted down all within like the same year, and like the Japanese government apparently didn't really handle that well, and so that was kind of a commentary on that. Shin Godzilla was. But then you go to Godzilla 2014, and it isn't as drawing a line in the sand about how nuclear weapons are bad. It kind of has that message, but it's not there fully. The antagonistic monsters feed on radiation, and there is a little bit of a message there. But there's this moment that bothers me in the 2019 King of the Monsters. That is the Dr. Serizawa character from the prior film, played by Ken Watanabe. His character kind of represents... He's the only part of the 2014 film that like goes, hey, nuclear weaponry is bad, and we shouldn't use it. And he has like the watch of his father that was there whenever the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And the 2019 one has that character go, yeah, nuclear weaponry is the way to go here, and he uses it to like give Godzilla like a super boost, superpower, and it's weird. I'm not going to say that it's necessarily offensive or that it's bad, but it kind of rubs me the wrong way in a sense, that you take the only aspect of the last movie that felt very anti-nuclear and very true to the legacy of Godzilla, and then you kind of go, yeah, but he's going to use a nuke to save this. I don't know. It felt weird to me.
Okay, so one final thought on the Godzilla movies. I know. One final thought.
For me, my final thoughts are just Godzilla is. There is a Godzilla movie for anyone, in my opinion. That you just have to look for it. If you want some dumb fun, there's plenty of those. If you want something a little bit more artsy, there's plenty of those too. There's a good handful of those. If you just want a solid action movie, you've got like the 2014 one and the 2019 one. It's a very approachable series despite being very huge.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me, and for those of you watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you hit like and subscribe and the bell notification so you know when I upload more videos, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.